Hey, deep balls were flying all over the place in week one. Did any of your guys catch them? Maybe they were on your bench. Maybe you fell victim to a few names you really weren't expecting. What can we expect here in week two of fantasy football? Let's talk some wide receivers, starts and sits. What's going on, Headliner Nation? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully you guys are all doing well out there. Welcome back to the Draft.com studios, where today we're talking about wide receivers for week two of the fantasy football season. Now, week one, it was totally crazy. Nobody out there was waiting for John Ross to go out there and put up huge numbers. A lot of people surprised about Marquise Hollywood Brown, but he was playing against the Dolphins, and I don't think they could beat the local JV team at this point. So that one's at least a little bit more realistic and understandable. But what's going to happen here for week two? That's what we're talking about, wide receivers in every matchup. All right, we're going to start this show off just like we did with the running backs, though. So if you haven't checked that show out, make sure you do that. But we're going to be fully transparent on this channel all season long. How did we do last week with our picks? We're going to put them up here on the screen. Last week, we talked about 70 wide receivers in this episode. 43 of them were correct calls as starts. That also includes with us taking away two players, Tyreek Hill and Mike Williams. They got hurt. Can we predict injuries? No, we can't, but we're counting them as misses. So technically, this percentage may be a few points higher. Some of our biggest hits of the week, we had Allen Robinson, Sammy Watkins, John Brown, and Michael Gallup all listed as starts last week. And if you started them, more than likely, you're pretty happy with their performance. Some of the biggest misses, some of the biggest names out there, really, Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Brandon Cooks. Nobody really saw John Ross, and Marquise Brown was a miss for us also. There are some huge games last week. Now, can we count on those every single week? No, we probably can't. But who are we going to start and sit here for week two of fantasy football? We're talking wide receivers in every matchup, and we're going to start right now. Bucks and Panthers up first, Thursday night football. So Chris Godwin up first. You're more than likely going to start Chris Godwin on a weekly basis. Unless there's some really great matchups for other wide receivers on your roster. Chris Godwin is somebody who has huge upside every single week. Mike Evans totally screwed a lot of people last week by basically disappearing. News is coming out now that he wasn't feeling great, wasn't 100%. Well, now it's a short week. How is he feeling this week? Is he limited at all at practice? Does he practice? Does he miss practice altogether? This is something we need to watch, because if he's not 100% going into this game, there may be better options on your bench depending on who else you have on your roster. Pay attention to those practice reports throughout the week. Short week, but it's something we got to pay attention to. DJ Moore, he's going to see volume in this game going up against a porous Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. And we know that Jameis Winston likes to turn the ball over. Could that lead to some extra possessions for the Carolina Panthers? Entirely possible. And the Panthers really need to get somebody else in this offense going. I mean, Curtis Samuel basically disappeared himself in week one, and they cannot continually give it to Christian McCaffrey every other play. It seems like the guy will break down over time. They need to get Curtis Samuel going in this offense to add that other dimension to this offense, to give them a better chance on a week-by-week basis. So both of these guys, Curtis Samuel more of a flex play, maybe in those deeper leagues, 12 teams or more. DJ Moore, I think, sees enough volume this week to be a low-end wide receiver too. Evans we're monitoring, and Chris Godwin, got him in my lineup. Cowboys and Redskins are next, and this is definitely a game where I think the Cowboys can put up big numbers once again. They looked great last week, and I expect a little bit more of the same here in week two. Amari Cooper, we're going to start him here. He does have somewhat of a tougher matchup going up against Josh Norman. However, the way this total offense is playing, I still think Amari Cooper can be serviceable here as a wide receiver too. Michael Gallup was a surprise to a lot of people. We had him as a start last week. A lot of people didn't really understand why. A lot of people were contemplating dropping him to the waiver wire. Don't. We've been talking about this guy all offseason, and we love what he's bringing to this offense this year. A lot of the defensive attention is going towards Zeke. It's going towards Cooper, who's going to benefit second-year wide receiver Michael Gallup. And also Randall Cobb is somebody else to keep an eye on. Is he a must-start? No, but the volume could be there. Dak looked his way a few times. So maybe if you're in one of those really deep leagues, 14 teams or more, Randall Cobb has some PPR upside. Trey Quinn is another name for the Washington Redskins to pay attention to, especially in PPR leagues. Deeper leagues, though, these are not guys that I'm wanting to go rolling out there on a 10-team or a 12-team league. They're a little bit farther down the list, but the upside, the potential is there. Case Keenum looked great at times, which is ridiculous because I really expected the Washington Redskins to come out and get totally rolled by Philadelphia last week, and that didn't happen. So Trey Quinn, another deep league flex play, along with Terry McLaurin, who had a huge opening day to his NFL career, a huge day, but a lot of it was big play dependent. I mean, heck, he missed another big play that really could have put him over the edge, but do we really want to rely on big plays in week 2? Are they possible? Yeah, but I like the Dallas defense still, and I'm not willing to bank on Terry McLaurin just yet. More than likely, he's either on your waiver wire or you just grabbed him. Sit him on your bench one more week. See if he can produce once again, and if it's possible that he does, he may turn into a weekly flex play. Right now, though, Kelvin Harmon and Paul Richardson of the Washington Redskins, neither one of them cracking my lineup. They're not going to see enough volume, not as much as Trey Quinn and Terry McLaurin anyway, so those guys going to be sits. Colts and Titans up next, and yes, for the starts, we're still starting T.Y. Hilton. We've been saying this for a few weeks also. T.Y. Hilton is still a very, very viable fantasy option. Did he take a hit in value when he lost Andrew Luck? Yeah, absolutely. However, we've been saying Jacoby Brissett is not a bad quarterback whatsoever. We kind of saw that last week. T.Y. Hilton doing what he does best, scoring touchdowns, and once again, he's going to be in our lineup. He's probably your wide receiver too, but the upside is still there. Also looking at Paris Campbell, at least in deeper leagues. Why? Hashtag never Funchess went to the IR. So I expect a slight uptick for the tight ends and maybe a little bit more volume going Paris Campbell's way. Nyheim Hines is another name that could possibly take up some of those targets in that. But they're going to run the ball in Indianapolis. I mean, Marlon Mack is somebody whose value is going to continue to climb because they're going to have to rely on that run game to take that pressure off of Jacoby Brissett. T.Y. Hilton, still a solid start. Paris Campbell in deeper leagues, somebody I'd look at as a flex play. As for Tennessee, Corey Davis, not going to start him. I mean, he was basically non-existent, and a lot of people were excited about A.J. Brown, and deservedly so. The guy had a great game. The problem is it's really big plays once again, and I have a hard time believing that right now, week 2 of your fantasy football season, you don't have a better option on your bench or in your lineup already than A.J. Brown. He's definitely somebody that maybe need to be rostered. If he's out there and available in your league, pick him up, stash him for a couple weeks. But I'm not ready to trust the passing offense yet of the Tennessee Titans. Some of those numbers by Marcus Mariota were inflated by a 75-yard touchdown pass to Derrick Henry. I don't think we can count on one of those every single week, and I'm not counting on the passing offense quite yet of the Tennessee Titans, sitting both Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. Seahawks and Steelers up now, and for the starts, we're going to stick with Tyler Lockett. I know he was a big disappointment in week 1. If it wasn't for that huge touchdown catch, a lot of people may have seen a big goose egg from Tyler Lockett, but I expect that to change here a little bit. DK Metcalf proved that he doesn't just run the go route. He's going to be involved in this offense. Both of these guys are going to be starts for me. We saw the New England Patriots just tear apart the Pittsburgh Steelers. They looked horrible, not only on the offensive side of the Steelers, but their defense at times, through the air anyway, was very porous. I mean, their run defense is a lot better than their pass defense in Pittsburgh, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with both wide receivers of the Seattle Seahawks this week, starting both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. I'm also going to start Juju, which to a lot of people seems obvious. However, Juju dealing with a slight ankle injury, this is something we need to monitor throughout the week. Now, they're coming out and saying that he is okay. Now, okay to me means, okay, he's good to play, but does he practice? Is he limited? Does he miss practice all week long? This is something to pay attention to, because as of right now, if he's really okay and he plays at 100%, we're starting him, and we're kind of going to fade Dante Moncrief and James Washington just a little bit. However, if Juju is limited or misses time, all of a sudden Dante Moncrief and James Washington get a bump in value. So we really need to monitor the injury of one Juju Smith-Schuster. If he plays at 100%, he's a start. If he's limited at all, I'm going to fade Juju this week and actually pick up either Moncrief or Washington and start him in his place. Bills and Giants up now, and for our starts, I'm going to start John Brown once again. He really seems to have developed that chemistry with Josh Allen to be that deep ball threat in Buffalo. He gave you a great week 1. More than likely, you probably didn't start him. Not a whole lot of people started John Brown. He was one of our starts last week, and he's going to be once again this week here in week 2. Sterling Shepard is also on the start list, but we need to pay attention to him. He is in the concussion protocol. He will have to clear that in order to obviously play. So that's another thing we need to monitor here throughout the week. If he plays at 100%, Sterling Shepard is somebody who's going to see a lot of targets in this game. The Buffalo run defense is very underrated, and there's very few pass catchers in New York. Sterling Shepard is a start, maybe as a flex play only, a flex play at best in deeper leagues, but we really need to pay attention to the concussion protocol and if he even plays or not. Cole Beasley, another one of these names who's going to see the volume in that offense. They brought him in here in the offseason, and he seems to be one of their go-to guys to move the chains. Maybe not huge numbers, but in PPR leagues, as a deep flex, he has value. As far as the sits go, Zay Jones and Cody Latimer, one from each team. Not going to even risk starting one of these guys here in week 2. I guarantee there's somebody better on your roster at this point. Do they have upside? Yeah, they do. I mean, Cody Latimer had a decent week 1, but I'm not ready to start him week 2 in my fantasy football leagues. There's a lot of options out there, a lot of depth at wide receiver. Not going to risk it with either one of these guys. Patriots and Dolphins up next, and I'm going to start everybody in a Patriots uniform. Like everybody, we got Josh Gordon, start. Julian Edelman, still starting him. Antonio Brown now in his first game as a Patriot. Yep, I'm going to start him. The water boy on the sidelines, put him in the game. What about the equipment manager? Sure, why not? At this point, anybody could probably score against the Dolphins. If they're in a Patriots pass-catching jersey, more than likely, I'm starting them this week if possible. Now, I'm going to sit the wide receivers of the Miami Dolphins, and why is that? Obviously, they're going to have to throw to stay in the game, right? Well, who do we really trust there? Albert Wilson didn't do a whole lot. Jakeem Grant didn't do anything. Devontae Parker, fantasy Bigfoot. Do we want to trust him in week 2 of your fantasy lineups? I really don't. I mean, there's other options. Like I said, there's more depth out there. Who's it going to be that catches those passes in Miami? Your guess is as good as mine. I'm not willing to risk it this early in the season. However, the Patriots, fire them all up. This could be a big one. Jags and Texans up next, and for DeAndre Hopkins, obviously you're going to start him. You drafted him way too early to sit him this early in the season, and he had a great game in week 1, even though he had a little bit of a case of the dropsies there a little bit. I think he had more drops in week 1 of this season than he had the entire year of last year, but it doesn't matter. It's DeAndre Hopkins. You're starting him anyway. On the opposite side of the ball, though, for the Jags, I really like this receiving crew. The ceiling may not be there. I mean, they're no DeAndre Hopkins by any means, but Dede Westbrook and Chris Connolly, they have low-end wide receiver 2 upside on a weekly basis at this point. And don't forget about DJ Chark. He's a deep league flex play for me this week. He's kind of a little bit more reliant on the deep ball, the big play, the touchdowns. That's DJ Chark. However, the people that are going to see the volume, the receivers that are going to see the majority of the targets, it's going to be Chris Conley and Dede Westbrook. Now, that offense for the Houston Texans seemed to move the ball at times pretty easily against New Orleans. If they can do that against Jacksonville this week, they're going to be forced to throw the ball once again. And even though Gardner Minshew may be the quarterback, he can still put up some solid numbers, and all these guys have upside for week 2. Now, for sits, I'm sitting Will Fuller and Kenny Stills. Now, Kenny Stills had the big play. Will Fuller had one great, amazing catch. But these two are way too big play dependent for me. I mean, maybe if you're in a 14-team league or larger, you can throw one at a flex play, but you're really banking on the fact that their only upside is if they get you a long touchdown. If they don't get it, you're going to be severely pissed. Kind of similar to DJ Chark, except I just think Jacksonville is going to have to throw a lot more to stay in this game. I can see more running in for Houston with Duke Johnson and Carlos Hyde. It's really a crapshoot with these guys, and I don't know if you want to take that risk this early. Vikings and Packers up now, and obviously we're going to start Devontae Adams. He disappointed in week 1 against the Bears, but he gets another tough matchup this week going up against the Vikings. The Vikings who made Julio Jones look, human last week. Now, Devontae Adams struggled a little bit last week against the Bears, but he's still the top target, and the ceiling is through the roof. Do we need to limit expectations slightly? Yeah, maybe we do. Maybe he doesn't have that huge game, but he's still a start. We can't sit him in week 2. As for Thielen and Diggs, we're starting Adam Thielen. He didn't do a whole lot after he got that early touchdown last week, but he's still somebody who needs to be involved in your lineup. You drafted him too early, and the touches and the targets should be there for him, especially with Stephon Diggs. How healthy is Stephon Diggs? If he misses any practices, if he's limited at all this week, he's going to become a sit for me. So that's something we need to watch and pay attention to. We don't need to put a limited Stephon Diggs in our lineup for the second straight week, especially against a Packers defense, which is very, very underrated. This defense we have is a top 10 unit, and they looked great last week. Now, MVS and Geronimo Allison, they had some big plays. Well, at least MVS had a big play there last week. Geronimo Allison, non-existent. Which one of these guys really takes a step forward in a consistent type of way still remains to be seen. And until we can find out which one of these guys is the safer play on a weekly basis, we're only starting Devontae Adams, sitting MVS and Geronimo Allison. Chargers and Lions up next, and there's a lot of pieces in this game that I like. Now, Keenan Allen, if you got him, you're going to start him. He's going to see, double-digit targets on a weekly basis. Mike Williams is a little bit of a question mark. Now, we need to make sure we monitor his health status throughout the week. He left the game early last week, hadn't really done a whole lot by the time he'd left the game, and a lot of people wanted to start panicking. Don't panic. It's week 1. Mike Williams is still a part of this offense. Don't worry. But we need him to be at 100%. If he's limited throughout the week, if he's not a full go by the weekend, we may sit Mike Williams, so that's something to pay attention to. Kenny Golladay had his week saved by a touchdown late there in Arizona. But I like him again here this week. That touchdown upside, that usage in this offense, in this passing offense, is going to be something that's, sustainable on a week-to-week basis. The ceiling, may be somewhat hit or miss. He may not have that huge ceiling on a weekly basis. However, the touchdown upside is always there, and so is the ability to get targets on a weekly basis. Marvin Jones, he's more of a flex play at best for me because he is really touchdown dependent, really big play dependent. Now, those big plays, it's possible that they happen this week, but in my opinion, as a flex play at best in deeper leagues, that's where Marvin Jones fits. Danny Amendola was a huge surprise. A lot of people didn't see the usage for Danny Amendola that he got in week 1. Does that continue? Entirely possible. I think they love him in this offense. He adds a different dimension to this offense, that quick passing game. And if he can get you close to 10 targets a week in PPR leagues, that's a solid flex play on a week-to-week basis. We know Danny Amendola does not stay healthy for 16 games. It's just one of those things that just doesn't happen. If you got him and you're in a deeper league, 12 teams or larger, Danny Amendola as a flex play in PPR leagues is not a bad option. Niners and Bengals up next, and this one's going to be a little bit difficult. Tyler Boyd, we're going to start Tyler Boyd this week going up against the San Francisco 49ers. In my opinion, he's a safe wide receiver 2-ish here this week. But what about John Ross? Everybody wants to crown John Ross as the new deep threat of the NFL. And he did. He looked great, but he's very big play dependent. I have him as a flex play, but I got to tell you, it's got to be in deeper leagues. I don't just trust that on a weekly basis those big plays are going to be there every single week. And if they're not, he could really hurt your fantasy lineup. More than likely, you went out to the waiver wire and got him if you even have him. You're not reliant on him. Let's hold him for another week or so and see if he can produce again. Maybe not to that level, but if he can go out there and grab 6-7 balls for 80-90 yards, now all of a sudden we can say, all right, John Ross is going to be something until AJ Green comes back. Got him as a flex play, but that's mostly for deeper leagues. Same thing goes for Deebo Samuel. As of right now, he may be the top target in that offense. We don't really know what's going on with Dante Pettis. News coming out that he had an illness. They kind of limited him because he was limited in practice throughout the week. We were not expecting that at all. I mean, Dante Pettis, in our minds, has that wide receiver 2 upside on the season. But until we can see him out there on the field and how they use him on a weekly basis, just put him on your bench one more week. Let's see what happens. If he starts to produce in this offense going forward, maybe weeks 3, 4, 5, he can regain that flex play, high-end wide receiver 2 upside. But until we see it, he's going to be a sit for me this week. Cardinals and Ravens up next, like a lot of pieces in this game. We're going to start Marquise Hollywood-Brown once again. Can we expect what we saw in week 1? No, not those numbers. I mean, that was absolutely ridiculous for his very first, NFL pro game. However, he has that game-breaking speed, and if they can continue to get him involved, not going to say that he's going to get one of those big plays on a weekly basis, but he always has that opportunity. And with the 2 starting defensive backs of the Arizona Cardinals still out, we're going to start Marquise Hollywood-Brown. Larry Fitzgerald, he just doesn't age. He's going to get double-digit targets, and he's out there trying to will this team to victory. Had a huge week last week and is sacrificing his body on a route-by-route basis, just trying to move the ball down the field. Love Larry Fitzgerald. Christian Kirk, another guy, going to see double-digit targets. The Cardinals run more offensive plays, or at least at a quicker pace, than any other team in the NFL. What does that tell you? They're going to run a lot more offensive plays throughout the season. The more plays they run, the more opportunity for fantasy points. Love both Kirk and Fitzgerald. The last name kind of had a little bit of fun with there. If you're in a deeper league, 14 teams or larger, looking for a flex play, Michael Crabtree is going to play his first game as an Arizona Cardinal up against his former team, the Baltimore Ravens. Is there a chance that the Cardinals get in the red zone and try to find Crabtree to kind of dig the sword in a little bit? Possibly. There's nobody else really to start in this game. I got Willie Snead as a sit. Do we really want to start Willie Snead anyway? Yes, he had a touchdown in a decent game last week, but not somebody we want to trust on a weekly basis right now, week 2 fantasy football. But the other names, they have some pretty big upside. Chiefs and Raiders up now, and we know Tyreek Hill is going to miss some time. So what do? Sammy Watkins, one of our starts last week, had an enormous game in week 1, and now he's going to be the top wide receiving option for the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the best offenses in all of football. He's going to be a start this week going up against the Raiders. Tyrell Williams, another name, another guy that's going to see a lot of targets by default for the Oakland Raiders because there's not a whole lot of other options there. Both those guys, solid starts for me here in week 2. We're going to sit Mecole Hardman. A lot of people are already starting to ask questions now that Tyreek Hill is hurt. Is Hardman next in line? He may get a slight bump in volume, but don't forget about Demarcus Robinson. And I can see a lot of extra targets going not only Sammy Watkins' way, but Travis Kelce's way. Maybe to even Shady and Damian Williams out of the backfield. Not going to say that, Mecole Hardman's going to go out there and lay a goose egg, but I'm not quick to go out there to the waiver wire, snatch him up, and start him right yet. Hunter Renfrow, another one of these guys who I think has some PPR upside, but it may take a few weeks in this offense to really solidify himself to where he becomes maybe somebody you want to start. Right now, though, not trusting in either one of these rookies. They're both sits for me. Ah, yes, the revenge game of the Saints and the Rams up now, and this one could have a whole lot of fireworks this week. Starting a lot of people. Michael Thomas, obvious must start. Doesn't matter who he's playing, he's in your lineup. Ted Ginn, I like Ted Ginn again this week. More of a flex play. We had him in the same spot last week. He came out, produced decent numbers for you if you had him in your lineup, and we expect him to have to throw once again. Ted Ginn, another solid flex play, at least in 12-team leagues or larger. And you're going to start all 3 of the guys from the Rams. I know Brandon Cooks disappointed last week, but with this high-powered offense, you can't really afford to sit any of these guys on a weekly basis. They're going to have to continue to throw all 4 quarters to keep pace with the New Orleans Saints. This could be an exciting game. So I got Cooks, Woods, and Kupp. All his starts also, if you got him, throw him into your lineup. Sits, Traquan Smith. Now, he did have a touchdown, but he saw limited targets, and there is no really other true wide receiver 2 in this offense. Ted Ginn is probably the next closest thing, followed by Jared Cook, and then Traquan Smith may be somebody they look at in the red zone. Outside of that, he just doesn't see enough targets on a weekly basis to start. Bears and Broncos up next. The only guy I'm going to start here is Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. Looked great against the Packers at times last week, and he's really their top option in the offense at this point. I do expect the Bears offense to recover from last week. They did not look good, but give a little bit of credit to the defense of the Green Bay Packers last week. I expect them to take a step forward here in week 2. Allen Robinson, their big playmaker. I'm going to start him against the Broncos. Now, I'm going to also sit Cortland Sutton and Emmanuel Sanders, and that may have you guys scratching your head because both had decent games in week 1. Why am I sitting them in week 2? I don't want to tempt fate. Look what they did to Devontae Adams last week. You mean Geronimo Allison non-existent. MVS was one big play. Do you really want to count on the wide receivers getting the ball from Joe Flacco against the Chicago Bears in the second week of your fantasy football season? I don't. I'm not taking the risk. I'm sitting both Sutton and Sanders. Battle of the Birds up next. We got the Eagles and Falcons, and I'm going to start everybody in this game. I expect a whole lot of passing this week in Atlanta for their home opener. You're starting Julio Jones. Calvin Ridley, somebody that you probably have as your wide receiver 2 or 3, really saved you with a miracle-esque type touchdown in week 1, but that upside is always going to be there for Calvin Ridley, and so is the volume. As for the Philadelphia Eagles, though, last week we had Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey both as starts. They kind of outdid our expectations, and Deshaun Jackson could be a huge piece of this offense. This is arguably the best quarterback he's had in his NFL career, and week 1 kind of shows that. They've really made a conscious effort to get him involved in this offense. Alshon Jeffrey, I expected him to lose some of that red zone opportunities to some of the other names they've brought in or the tight ends in this offense. However, he's still a big enough part of this offense. Nelson Aguilar, he's not listed here. He'd be a sit for me. He's just not going to see that consistency from a week-to-week basis. But all the main pieces here, Julio, Calvin Ridley, Deshaun Jackson, and Alshon Jeffrey, they're all starts for me here in week 2. Oh, did you guys hear that? Must be everybody jumping off the Browns bandwagon after their week 1 steamrolling loss to the Tennessee Titans. But give the Titans credit. They looked great. They came out on fire, and the Browns just struggled. It was their first game, all of them playing together in a regular season game, and they didn't look great. They looked rusty. They did not look like they were ready to play in week 1. More concerning, though, is the hand injury to Baker Mayfield. Is he going to be 100%? That's what we really need to pay attention to, because you're going to start Odell Beckham. More than likely, you have Jarvis Landry as your wide receiver 2 or 3, flex play, deeper leagues, depending on your league size. But if Baker Mayfield is limited or maybe even misses time, I don't know how interested I am in starting Beckham or Landry. So we need to pay attention to the health of one Baker Mayfield. On the Jets side of the football, we're going to start Jamison Crowder because he's going to get a buttload of targets. The guy absolutely surprised people in week 1. We expect him to eat up some targets, Maybe not quite as many as he did, though, last week. And if that's how they're going to run this offense, Jamison Crowder kind of becomes a weekly flex play in PPR leagues. I mean, I don't want to call him a must start, but if that volume is there, this is definitely somebody you can rely on. Robbie Anderson kind of had a disappointing week one, probably because all the targets went to Jamison Crowder, but a few more of those targets could go the way of Robbie Anderson this week, especially if Baker Mayfield plays and Cleveland can move the ball down the field. It will force the Jets to have to throw more. I can see Robbie Anderson breaking a big play this week. Quincy Enunwa, not somebody we're going to start here in week 2, so we're not going to pay attention to him too much. But we really need to follow the health of one Baker Mayfield because that's going to determine a lot of what you want to do with Beckham and Landry. All right, so those are all the starts and sits here for week 2 for the wide receiver positions. Maybe you agree with some, maybe you don't. Put it down in the comments section. We just ask that you remain respectful. This back and forth with us, trying to talk each other through it, only helps us win more fantasy football games. You're never going to hear us sit up here and say that we know more than you, and you need to listen to us. Listen, we're just supplying perspective to try to help your decision-making a little bit easier on game day. These are your teams. You're making the final calls. You can't come to us and point fingers if we don't get it right. Why? Because we don't see the future. But let's talk about it. Let's put it down in the comment section. Between the two of us, we can really help make the best decision for our fantasy football teams. We're here as a team. We're here as a community, a positive community, and we're looking forward to talking with you guys. If you're new here to the channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. We do these start-sit videos every single week, and we do them for the 4 major positions. We'll have quarterback and tight end coming out, and then we'll also have some rankings here towards the end of the week. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It really helps us out on YouTube. We greatly appreciate your support. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you later.